Were the penalties on Friday not as bad as we first thought? Is TCU trying to turn Josh Hoover into Brock Purdy? We'll talk about that next year on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. You can find me on Twitter at SimcoxSteven. I came up with some fun names today because I was tired of just putting Twitter handles on there. So I'm on Long Island Sharks Respecter today. Matt Jennings, freelance writer, knower of ball, is with us. And, okay, Matt, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Do all that stuff. Housekeeping, done. Congratulations to me. Okay. So I was watching this game Sunday after I watched it Friday. And here's the take I came up with, and you can tell me if I'm giving TCU a free pass or being dumb or whatever. 7 penalties for 100 yards, not ideal. But 6 of those penalties, I'm laughing as I'm saying this like I'm saying it like a positive thing. 6 of them were of the 15-yard variety. 3 of those were on the first drive.
Yeah.
2 of them were very silly. You know, knocking a receiver out of bounds on a throw, not good. Knocking a quarterback out of bounds when he's pulling up, getting the sideline, not great. A couple of them, quickly, yes or no, did you think the Abe Kamara penalty was warranted? Where he, like, ripped his arm out kind of demonstratively?
Live, I didn't think it was. When they showed the replay, what struck me, and I think the ref might have actually been reacting to, was he kind of does the rip out, and he's also like trying to, as he's extricating himself, he rips out with this hand, and he kind of like pushes up and out with the other hand, and he kind of got the other guy like in the face mask or in the helmet, kind of the head area. And so I don't think the rip was it. I think it was like, it seemed like it was like a shove, maybe not quite a punch, but like while the guy was down, kind of pushing that. So like that one, I was like, when I watched the replay, I was like, okay, I guess I can kind of see what it was. But I definitely agree, like live, I was like, what is this? Doesn't warrant anything. It seemed ticky-tacky to me, though.
I saw a lot of people be like, well, he was just trying to get his arm free because I think he tackled that guy named Tiger Bachmeier from Stanford, and they were kind of tangled up. But, I mean, he did it in a real, like, I don't know. I feel like he opened himself up to the flag with the motion. But whatever. That was kind of ticky-tack. The James Brockermeyer one, which I don't think many people remember, that one was stupid. Like, he was blocking a guy. He laid on top of him. That happens every football game ever. So, Cam Cook had a chop block. He had 1 holding penalty. But you had no false starts, no delay games, none of those like, hey, our tight end's covering up our wide receiver, and so this play is getting called back. A lot of the focus, attention to detail penalties. Do you think, like, I'm not saying they can get away with having 6 personal foul penalties in a ball game, but a lot of that seems like kind of aggressiveness that you can tune back on instead of just silly mental mistakes that are harder to fix.
I would agree. Yeah, I think a lot of the penalties in those, especially those ones in the first drive, and so many of them kind of attributed to the defense, were a product of this new defensive style of that's just so much more aggressive. Combine that with it's week 1 and everyone's just kind of been like raring to go for months, and think, you know, tempers ran a little bit high. People were just ready to get out there and hit somebody, and you got to learn to kind of ratchet that back. So I think if, you know, you keep seeing that over the next couple of weeks, then I think you can talk about it as a problem. It's not something that's concerning to me now. I agree with you. The lack of procedural penalties was a delightful surprise to me, because, and that was one thing in fairness, in Bryles and in fairness to the offense that we talked about a week ago, right? Like the lack of attention to detail being the thing that I was like, I don't know. There's nothing to me that says that's going to be different. 1 game sample size, which is very small, but 1 game sample size thus far, that part of it looks good. We can have a conversation about execution in the red zone and about getting cute in short yardage. We can still have those conversations, but the offensive line play and the attention to detail in that respect. So far, so good.
Okay, so let's stay positive for a minute. We'll talk about the defense. It was good. I mean, it's fun to watch. Some pressure, some sacks, some new faces that were exciting. Devin Deal, Cooper McDonald, some old faces that were exciting. Marcel Brooks, Marcus Steele. I guess what impressed you the most about the defense in week 1? Was there something that you're like, yeah, that's got to get fixed? Yeah. What were some of your general thoughts about Andy Avalos and his crew and their play against Stanford?
Yeah, I mean, I think the approach is something that you're like, okay, this is something that we complained about all year. A year ago with Joe Gillespie was like, we don't know what the identity is. It's not really clear like what you're aiming. Like we know in theory what they were trying to do, but again, 1 game sample size, it was so clear exactly what they were trying to do, what they were trying to say. Like, this is our identity, is we are trying to affect the quarterback. We're trying to create negative plays. We're trying to confuse the opposing offense by either bringing pressure from different angles or simulating pressure, showing guys, then dropping them back. Like, they're going to be aggressive. They're going to try and confuse you. They're going to try and create those negative plays. Cool. I know exactly what you're trying to do, and they were good at it for the most part. They're gonna blow by last year's sack total and tackle for loss total if I were to put money on it, right? The thing that I would say would be concerning is, again, with that aggression. We already talked about the penalties. The other part of it is as they were going after the quarterback, there were multiple instances where they did not maintain the rushing lanes. And Ashton was able to just break contain multiple times and extend plays or run for a first down. So you got to clean that up. If you're going to bring that pressure, if you're going to be that aggressive, you got to get home, or you have to keep contained. Otherwise, then you're just like, you're opening yourself up to what happened a couple times on Friday, and you're handing first downs over. But I like that it's very clear what their identity is. It's and they seem to have the players to be able to do it, at least on the front end. We can have a different conversation about the back end. Although I was pleasantly surprised by what we saw from the secondary overall. Now, some of that might be level of competition, but.
Well, another thing about the secondary that I thought I liked it. I thought the biggest takeaway from those corners was those dudes just look competitive. Yeah. Like those JT Broughton and Lamarian James both look like guys that, I mean, they're going to get beat occasionally. Obviously, everybody does, but they're going to get theirs too. And they're going to fight and scratch and claw. There was a lot of physicality in that coverage, which is fine, but it's one of the reasons why Jack Besh kind of got mauled a few times. Yeah. But I didn't really complain about it because I was like, well, they've been letting, JT Broughton just have his hands all over Eric Almainer. But yeah, I was super impressed with the secondary in general. And I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't say it's been a while because we had Travis Hodges-Tomlinson, but it's been a minute. It feels like since they had like a lockdown corner, Matt. And I don't know if they really have it, but they at least got some guys that are willing to, mix it up in there, which is cool.
Yeah, agreed. I love what we saw from Broughton. A.M. Ainer finished the game with 102 yards, and he wasn't like shadowing him. He wasn't with him like all the time, but on the plays where you saw him with him, he was holding his own pretty well. The only place where it was like, okay, like that was a win on that rep in a distinctive way for me was when A.M. Ainer made that catch to kind of extend Stanford's final final touchdown drive and kind of got him down the red zone, where it's just like, he was able to beat him and extend that drive for them. With the exception of that one, he was really staying with him. He was and showing some really good things. I was very as we talked about, very kind of nervous about the depth at corner, and Broughton especially was very impressive to me. Maybe it shouldn't be super surprising. He comes from a program at Utah, which was known for these very physical defenses that make life just miserable for opposing passing games. So he's definitely brought that thus far. With the exception of Amer, no other Stanford player had more than 17 yards receiving. So, like, on the whole, contained him very well. Now, again, is that just because Ashton Daniels is the quarterback or because they can't protect on the offensive line? You know, we'll know more about who Stanford is. They weren't picked to finish very high in the Atlantic Coast Conference, which is where they play now, in case anyone was unclear on that, because their former conference doesn't exist anymore. That's going to take some getting used to. They were picked to finish last in the ACC, so take it all with a little bit of a grain of salt. But, again, enjoyed the approach. Love that you know what their identity is and that they're really committed to it. Can they do the same thing against some higher-level opponents? I will say one other thing. The penalties on the first drive, gave Stanford, that drive would have resulted in a punt very early on, if not for those penalties. And then so that was a touchdown drive. And then they had another touchdown drive that started on the TCU 20 after a JP Richardson fumble. So I would say like the 27 points that they, got was a little misleading in terms of the overall play of the defense. I thought their overall play was better than what you might immediately think from looking at the final box score.
All right, I got to talk to Matt about what they're doing with Josh Hoover, they being the TCU coaching staff, and how it's kind of strange to me. So we'll get into that next here on Locked On Horned Frogs. Your team, we do it here every day. I do want to quickly mention 5-Hour Energy. Go to 5hourenergy.com. You can order 5-Hour Energy online now. Did you know that? Now you do. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. It's all natural. It has limited sugar and other bad stuff in it, so you can feel pretty good while energizing your body. Also, you don't have to just go to the gas station to get it anymore. Now you can put together your own 12 or 24-pack with all the different flavors they have at 5hourenergy.com. Again, that promo code is LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. 5hourenergy.com, proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. Okay, so, Matt, Josh Hoover was 28 of 42 on Friday for 353 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. He didn't really throw like any dangerous passes that I can think of. Dangerous being like in traffic, that type of thing, almost interceptions. 8.5 yards per completion, according to ESPN. These numbers are from Pro Football Focus. He threw 2 passes over 20 yards during the ball game. Now, he did complete one of those, so he's 1 for 2. He threw 17 passes between 0 and 10 yards. He threw 7 passes between 10 and 20 yards, and everything else was either at or behind the line of scrimmage. I know this is kind of Kendall's identity now, but it was still kind of jarring to me to watch how often it was like RPO, quick out, quick throw to, a receiver who's just running a curl, a stop. They had success with it, and they had some big plays where he hit somebody on a slant or just a little in pattern, and they took it, down the field. So there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, but I'm struck by the lack of vertical passing, not even game, but just attempts. I mean, like they didn't even attempt to throw the ball down the field. And it feels like it's trending more that direction. What do you think about what they're doing in the passing game and how they're trying to move the ball down the field right now?
I thought for Hoover, I thought what he was asked to do, he was very, very good at. He was, to your point, this offense is very much like, and so much of it's RPOs, and then when it's not an RPO, it's usually like a half field read. It's usually like 1-2 go. It is encouraging the quarterback to make quick decisions, And he has shown that he's good at doing that. He goes, he makes his read, the ball's out on time. There was never, I say never, there weren't really any instances that I remember where, the ball, he was indecisive, he looked hesitant, or where he was kind of going through the reads and he made the wrong read. Now, again, usually, some of these plays it's one read. Like, this is the read because it's an RPO. It's either you're handing off or you're throwing to this guy, right? But he was making the right read more often than not. And he was on target more often than not. He was hitting guys in stride. There were a few instances where I think his ball placement, his accuracy, obviously suffered. He threw behind or low for Savion a couple times. There was that one throw to JP Richardson where he's just running a little bit of an out, and Richardson kind of, extended and made the catch and got the first down. But it was like there was not really a need for him. So there's obviously room for him to improve, but in terms of what they're asking him to do, doing it well, I am curious on the vertical passing piece if that's a matter of who they're playing, it's Stanford, we're gonna be a little more conservative because we know that we can. And then, show some more against the opponents down the road. Is it a matter of who you had available at receiver, or rather even who Josh Hoover has the best rapport with? Because Savion Williams, JP Richardson, and Jack Bech are clearly guys that Hoover trusts implicitly and has a lot of comfort with. And so if those are your three guys, Williams and Richardson, I guess, would be the ones that you would say are the ones that, have the most speed to their game, but they're not throw vertically down the sidelines kind of guys. That group that you would have that would be doing that. And so is it a product that it's a 1 game sample size. It's hard to really pick out the one thing, but if they can keep doing this, if they can protect Josh Hoover, which the offensive line did a good job with, and he can make the correct reads on his RPOs and he can get the ball out quickly, decisively, accurately, more often than not, you can win games doing that. They were very efficient. The matter is just, are you going to then score once you get into scoring territory? Because the nice thing about those big plays downfield are, if you can score from 40 yards out, you don't have to be good at scoring from inside the 10. But if you're not going to hit those big passing plays, your execution in the red zone and even outside that area, really once you get inside the 40, has to be dialed in. And it hasn't been for TCU over the last year. And it didn't look that way on Friday. Now, again, it's week 1. So can they improve on that? I'm more optimistic about that based on what I saw on Friday than I thought I was going to be. So maybe that's something, even though they failed to do it the fact that Hoover wasn't on his back constantly, that they weren't having those procedural penalties that we were talking about, that they were willing to run the ball with Cam Cook and he was able to kind of get you difficult yardage in 3rd and short and 3rd and medium. Those are all things that's okay, now let's put all those things together. Maybe the red zone picture looks a little bit better as the season goes on. Maybe.
Jim Norris, who listens to the show, he commented on YouTube today. He was like, well, I just don't think they have anybody who can take the top off the defense, which I guess is fair. A lot of their speed guys are more like slot guys and not outside wide receivers. I felt like Eric McAllister could be that dude, but he only played 3 snaps Friday, so not sure what they feel about him and what they think about his talent level. But, I think it's also – it was hard to grade the offensive line Friday. I thought they did a good job, but again, so much of the passing game was quick stuff.
Right.
That they weren't having to, there wasn't a lot of traditional dropbacks. So they weren't having to really get in their pass sets, move their feet, take that 2nd and 3rd move from a defensive end or tackle. It was just about all right, let's stand this guy up, make sure that there's a throw-in lane, and then, allow him to make that happen. So I guess we'll see as the year goes on kind of what they want to do. All right, I want to talk about this. I don't like I feel like if you tweet during a game, there's immunity. I don't want to bring up people's tweets during a game. I tweeted more Friday than I typically do because I get emotional and I don't want to tweet. But Matt sent this out in the second half on Friday. TCU is almost doubling up Stanford on a yards per play basis. if they could be marginally better in high leverage situations or avoid them entirely, they'd be running away. Alas. Okay. Was this about red zone stuff? Was this about third and fourth down conversions? What were you lamenting at that point?
Mostly those failures at finishing drives, right? You had I believe it was after the Timon Mitchell interception, and you go for it on fourth down, and in deep inside Stanford territory, and you don't get it. And then you have, a missed field goal on a different drive. You have to settle for field goals later. You have the fumble at the mesh point between Hoover and Cook on that drive right before halftime, after one of those one big vertical passing plays that they had, right? And it's if two of those plays, come out differently, you come out that game breathing a lot easier, I think, right? And my point being, again, if your game plan is going to be, hey, we're going to have this very quick passing game, RPO heavy offense, right? And we're not really worried about attacking vertically very often. That's totally fine. But that means the margins for you are smaller, right? Or rather, what's happening at the margins matters more. Because, again, if you can hit a big 60-yard passing play touchdown, you can hit 2 of those a game, then the fact that you suck inside the 20 doesn't matter as much, right? But if you're going to play a style of game that doesn't include as many explosives, then those details become way more. And that's what I meant by avoiding the high leverage situations. If you were just, if you're up 21-0 on Stanford and then you go for it on fourth down from their 30 and you don't get it, it's who cares, right? Yeah. But if you're doing that in a game where you're trailing by 3, then that matters way more, right? And so that's the thing that I'm talking about is, can you either need to be efficient enough and execute at a high enough level where the little details don't matter, or you need to get better at the details. And they weren't doing the former on Friday. They looked marginally better at the details in some cases, and they looked like more of the same in other cases on Friday. So again, I think it's a matter of it's week 1. People say hey, the biggest improvements that teams make are usually is between week 1 and week 2. So I'm and in terms of okay, gotten out there, you've gotten hit for the first time for real in a game action. You've actually had to deal with communication and execution in a live game environment. You know what to expect. Now, how do you improve from there with your practice reps and your game reps, right? So you get your tune-up game, your paycheck game against Long Island this week, and then you go on the road and you play SMU. We're going to see what happens, right?
Yeah. I went back and watched all the red zone plays, and I came away with an interesting thought. I think they did okay. Now, my issue with Kendall in the red zone is really more philosophical. I don't think he got too cute in the situation. Yeah. I just don't love this is not just only a him problem, but spread offenses in general. I don't understand. I mean, I get it. It's because you don't get under center a lot, and so you're not comfortable there. I don't get putting your offense in the gun when you're at the 2 or the 1 yard line.
Moving the ball back 5 yards to move forward then 2 yards.
Well, and then also it's if you're going to run formations like that, so on first and goal from the 1, they got trips to the right. Well, now you got 6 guys blocking and you got 8 dudes in the box. Right. The math just doesn't make any sense. And I know a lot of people are well, they last year they ran a lot of vertical or horizontal stuff in the run game because they didn't trust their O-line. But in my mind, it's if you don't trust your O-line, then go to heavier packages. Mm-hmm. I know they don't have a ton of personnel for that, but hell, put Ben Taylor Whitfield as a tight end. Bring in another tackle on the end line. Bring in Drake Dabney or Chase Curtis. Bring in Dominic Johnson as an H-back. And do power football, because that's going to change the math and get more push. Running dive plays, from a single back set with 3 wide receivers split out wide, if you're not going to do anything with them, doesn't make sense to me. But that being said, a lot of it, as you said, comes down to really execution. Like Josh had Chase Curtis on a touchdown throw near the goal line, just missed him, and they had to kick a field goal. But again, it's like that chicken and egg thing of if you don't feel like you can take shots down the field, then yeah, you got to hit those. Like you got to hit those plays. There's not a lot of margin for error, and so that's tough. Go ahead.
Well, and I will say the thing that gives me a little bit of I think could be reason for optimism is Cam Cook was very impressed and very encouraged by what you saw from him on Friday, in terms of there were moments where the blocking was not there, the lane was not there, and he makes a guy miss in the gap and is able to get the yardage that he needs on a crucial third down, whether that's like 3rd and 1, 3rd and 4. He makes it happen. And that's something that I feel like they didn't have a year ago, because Imani Bailey was such a straight line speed guy. And just like there was, to use Gary Patterson's, preferred terminology, there was not a lot of wiggle to Imani Bailey's game. Now that's fine if you got the lanes for him, but because he was kind of, running into a really muddy blocking picture so often, and it wasn't working well. And then you got Trey Sanders, who is, a little bit more of a power back, not necessarily gonna, juke anybody out of their socks not very often anyway. And then the one time he got the ball on Friday, he fumbled. Cam Cook showed that including on that touchdown to kind of seal the game, the ability to make guys miss, sort through, a little bit of a muddy blocking picture, right? And Kendall, again, to his credit, showed a willingness to, it's 3rd and 1, or it's 3rd and short, it's 3rd and medium. To your point, not really breaking out the gadget plays. Now, again, maybe that's just because it's week 1 and they're keeping things vanilla, but not really breaking out something cute and just being like, we're going to hand off to Cam Cook, we're going to trust him to get the yardage, and usually he did, right? And so those would be things that are, if you're looking for reasons for encouragement, that's what I would point to, is like, okay, if you're going to do that, and that's going to be your approach, and you can build on that, and your offensive line had played basically no live game reps together before Friday, keeps improving, and their chemistry gets better over the course of the season, and that blocking picture gets less muddy, maybe start feeling a little bit better. So, those are things that give me a little bit of like, okay, like let's wait and see. Like I'm willing to be proven wrong about what my stance was on this. Again, you feel very differently about all that if you weren't trailing going into halftime in a half empty stadium in Palo Alto. It wasn't, the dominant performance, but again, between kind of gifting points to Stanford and then also just, just 2 or 3 plays in scoring territory that could have gone differently. I mean, this is a game that TCU very easily could have put up like 45 in, and that Stanford could have been sub 20. Now, coulda, shoulda, woulda, right? But I do think, if I love to reference Parker Fleming's, did we really get beat that bad chart that he puts on Twitter every week. TCU was in the top half of the country in terms of like net success rate, right? Mm-hmm. Over the Stanford. Like they did better than Michigan, who got into a rock fight with Fresno State. They did better than UNLV, who beat the crap out of Houston. They did better than Vanderbilt, who beat Virginia Tech in an upset, right? And like they were beating Stanford more often than not to a degree that you normally would have thought they would have won that game by 14, 17 points. They just had a couple weird bounces, right? But those weird bounces went their way this time, as opposed to last year when they weren't usually. So,
all right, we'll close with a positive note on a guy who looks like he might have finally found a spot. We'll do that next time on Locked On Horned Frogs. All right, if you're looking for a new way to waste time on your phone, look no further. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. It's an app that's in the App Store or on Google Play. You can recruit. You can build your program, build the facilities, get funding, all those things. Download the game at ultimate-cfb.com or download the app in app stores. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Run your own college football program. Do it today. Proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. Okay, so you talked about Cam Cook. I agree with you. Good stuff from him. Like the vision, like the intensity. Felt like he got better as the game went on. Another guy on the defensive side. Had a penalty on the first drive, but I think Marcel Brooks only played 10 snaps. He technically had 2 sacks, really had 3. One got negated by a penalty. He's bounced around. He was on offense at one point. He was on defense. It never really worked out. I'm excited for him. He finally found a spot where he can thrive, Matt. This is really cool to see.
What a time to think about when we were messing around with Marcel Brooks at receiver for a hot minute. That's wild to think about. That was easily Marcel Brooks, his best game of his career at TCU thus far, right? I mean, this is what you were picturing when he came over after one season at LSU, former 5-star recruit, this idea of like this guy with positional flexibility, the ability to rush the passer, that this was the thing, right? Like the speed and the ability to kind of get to the quarterback. And that's exactly what you saw on Friday. It's exactly what you want. If they're going to use him as like, hey, in our, people always call it like the NASCAR package or whatever, your pass rushing package, and put him out there and just like go at him, go after the quarterback. And that's all he's got to worry about doing. Awesome. Cool. Let's do it. And he's got the speed to kind of do some other stuff too. But that was the thing that was, I think, a lot of fans were like really frustrated with when Gary was coaching the defense, was his unwillingness to kind of allow Marcel Brooks to do that. Like, hey, put him in on passing downs and let him go and figure the rest out later. And then he didn't really have a home in Gillespie's defense that put so much less emphasis on edge rushers going after the passer, right? And so now he's in, as we talked about, this defense that is very much about affecting the quarterback, creating negative plays, and being aggressive and bringing that pressure from multiple angles. So I think this is the perfect situation for him, and I'm excited for him. I'm sad that it took this long to get to that point, but I hope we get to see more from him over the course of the season.
Over under 50 points on Saturday against the Long Island Sharks.
Over. I think over's good. I think they were very close to 40 plus against Stanford in a game where they had a lot of stuff go wrong for them. So I think over 50, and you get some reps for the young guys, and it'll be great.
I think so too. I think we're going to see Seals Team 6, Ken Seals out there for a lot of the second half, and it's going to be fun. Long Island, we'll recap it next week. He's Matt Jennings. I'm Steven Simcox. Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast.